good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Oh, hey.
Hey, good morning. Surprise.
Well, there you go. If we haven't met, my name's Jake, and just really thrilled to be here with you and to continue this series. We've been talking about this idea of walking each other home, and really that life is a spiritual journey, and like any journey, there are ups and downs, there are incredible difficulties, and there are high highs and low lows, and yet among all of that, we walk with each other, we walk alongside each other, holding space for the various things that not only we face as individuals, but as collective, as community. And so we've been in that conversation, exploring all the different aspects of that. And I thought, something that would be really fitting to talk about today would be an example of a type of life path in which one is walking with people, walking other people home as part of their career spiritual journey. And so today we're going to really dig into something that you may or may not have familiarity with, which is chaplaincy. And to do that, we have someone who has been a chaplain, I would say maybe twice the length that I've been alive, right?
At least.
At least, okay. Around there. So I wanted to invite someone with that experience, someone who has become a deeply contributing member of this community. As you saw, we played the song that was the collaboration between Roger and Bill. Roger also offers many meditations here, and him and Sue have just become a beloved part of this community. So would you welcome Roger today?
Thank you.
I have had the pleasure of getting to know you, and one of the forums that we got to know each other was in our most recent Intro to Aldea class, which is something that we offer a couple times a year just for people who might be new or new-ish to get their bearings at Aldea. What is this community, and what is some of the history? So Roger and Sue participated in that in our most recent session, and one of the things that we do to start that group is to give each person an opportunity to share a little bit of who they are and what might have brought them to Aldea. Something that I've found is that if you're at Aldea, probably means your spiritual journey has been interesting, right? You all are like, yes, that's me. So I love hearing about that, and I love hearing every person's journey, and that's one of the forums that we get to do that. And so I thought, hey, I got to hear that from you. Would you honor the community by just sharing that little 2-minute elevator speech of who is Roger and how did he end up at Aldea?
2 minutes.
Or less.
Or less.
Don't worry, we have more time for other stuff after.
I was hoping for more. First of all, thanks to Bill for the music that applied to those words. It was really beautiful. Thank you, Bill. And thanks to Jake for the conversation, and thanks to you for being here to share in it. It's really fitting, I think, to talk about chaplaincy and that specialized form of ministry in connection with walking each other home. But about Sue and about me, Dallas, Texas is home. Grew up there, went to school there, high school, junior high, elementary, junior high, high school, and finally degree from SMU in Dallas. When I was in high school, I met this beautiful young lady with big brown eyes, and I figured a way to have lunch at the same time at the same table so I could just sit there and get lost in that brown, beautiful eyes. And 65 years later, they're still beautiful. So we're thanks to Sue, because she has been such an absolutely important part of everything that I've been able to do. When I graduated from SMU, I was trained to be a journalist and went through journalism school, went to work for what was then United Press International in Dallas. Happened to be there at the time of the Kennedy assassination. I spent the night in the basement parking lot of the Dallas City jail system, big building downtown, with a photographer, because we knew that at some point they were going to move Lee Harvey Oswald from the city jail to the county, which was about 4 blocks away. And to do that, they were going to have to bring him down through the parking area in the basement, put him in a car to drive off. I waited and waited and waited, spent the night there, got tired, went home. A few hours later, down they came with him, and a crowd had gathered, and out of the crowd stepped Jack Ruby, who pulled a pistol and shot him in the basement. I had been standing in that very spot, and I felt like a failed journalist at that point because I missed the story. But so many things have developed over time that have kind of pointed me in a direction that eventually ended up in a caring ministry called chaplaincy. So soon I have 3 children, one in Portland, Oregon, one in D.C. area, and a daughter here. And that's all you need to know, I think. What else do you need to know?
You know, people have had the opportunity to be a part of times when you've come up and you've shared beautiful meditations or poetry. You have this beautiful song now that is a part of community life here. And people might be wondering, you know, what is this well that you're drawing from? And, you know, getting to know you, I know that at least part of it is your many years of experience through walking people through some of the most difficult things of life and in the form of chaplaincy. And not just difficulty, but through celebration and through just all the ups and downs and in very specific form. So for those who might not have familiarity with what chaplaincy is, I'd love if you could maybe explain a little bit. And of course, you're weaving that into your own experiences, your own experience of it. And so, yeah, I would love if you could really bring us into the world of chaplaincy.
Chaplaincy is essentially what we are dealing with right now, talking about walking practically side by side with somebody. It varies and is different from institutional ministry in that when I was a pastor of a church, for instance, I had a building and an office and people came and I did the typical traditional things. But chaplaincy allows a lot more freedom, I think, to be where people are instead of waiting for them to come to the institution. I've been a Navy chaplain for 20 years on active duty. I was a hospice chaplain for 5 years, and I've had a volunteer role with a police department as a chaplain in a city in Texas. So I have a feel for what chaplaincy is about, and it's really about walking with somebody in a way that brings out the spiritual dimensions and addresses emotional and psychological, sometimes very practical issues about life. And I can best describe it probably by showing you a couple of pictures that, and the first one puts me on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier, small carrier, and I wanted to show this because as a military chaplain, I wore a uniform kind of like you see here, and on the right side collar here was the insignia of my rank. Happened to be a silver cluster. On this side was the symbol of what I was about, and that was a cross to identify me as a chaplain. And the main issue, the reason I mention this is because it's very important in the military chaplaincy to decide if you're, in my case, a naval officer who is acting as a chaplain, or am I a chaplain who is working as a naval officer. Chaplaincy always came first. Chaplaincy dates back, if you want to do history, and you can go read it yourself, to Martin of Tours back in the 4th century, who, so the story goes, was riding one day along a road and saw a hungry, cold beggar in the winter and stopped and took his sword and cut his own cloak in half and wrapped the man in half of his cloak. The word chaplain comes from cloak and so forth. So chaplaincy is a specialized ministry that you will find in hospitals and police departments and fire departments, and secular corporations now have chaplains, all of whom are attempting to reach and touch people in the practicalities of their lives. So, and when I was trained to be a journalist, I was told you can write the very best news story if you answer 5 questions: who, what, when, why, and where. If you can satisfy those 5 questions, you got a pretty good story. So I thought I would just use that, those 5 W's, to say that the who is men, women, people who are trained in a theological setting and who qualify to apply and be enlisted in one of the military branches. The next slide. This was my little chapel, simple little place. This is the chapel at the U.S. Naval Academy, the exterior of it, and it is a marvelous place. This is the where it happens, at least in one setting. The magnificent interior. It is, if you've ever been there, it's called the Cathedral of the Navy, and it is a huge stone building, granite building, marble. In the basement of that building is the crypt of John Paul Jones, and it happens that my office was in the basement area. So every morning I got to say, "Good morning, John Paul," as I walked by. And, not everybody can say that. Next is part of what I did as on active duty was to speak in that chapel to bring messages to midshipmen. The Naval Academy is an amazing place, as is all the aspects of chaplaincy across the Navy. And the next is sometimes in teaching. I was able to do some classroom work with midshipmen, along with the specific ministry aspects. And also, that's me, hanging from a helicopter. I had a squadron of 5 ships, all destroyers, out of San Diego. And in order to bring ministry to each of the 5 ships underway, the only way to transfer was to get into that helicopter as it hovered over a ship and to sit in the open door with my legs hanging out, and as a crewman put a harness around me and a metal cable and then said, "Are you ready?" And I would say yes, and he'd shove me out the door and reach out and stabilize me so that I'm not spinning or swinging, and then lower me down to the ship below. And those 2 fellows standing on the little flight deck of that destroyer, one of them has a big rubber glove on with a chain attached to it, and the chain touches the metal of the ship because there's so much static electricity created that if he doesn't have that on, it just knocks your fillings out of your teeth. You know, it's very uncomfortable. So I looked down to see if this man had that glove on. If he didn't, then I'm going to climb back up get back in that helicopter. So that's some of the where of the way things happen. The ministry is one of presence, just being available. And we all do that. We all, in that sense, to make ourselves available to each other. So that's kind of what it's about and some illustrations of it.
It's interesting talking about the caller and the duality of that experience of you're both in this setting, which maybe not everyone gets to experience, and yet you're also representing something spiritual. And you and I had a conversation earlier this week exploring that idea that maybe there's no parent that wants to see their child go to war, and yet right. Every parent maybe would hope that that child would have access to some sort of spiritual comfort and counsel. Maybe elaborate a little bit on how you held that in your experience.
I agree. I think when we send our sons and daughters, our grandchildren off in uniform in a military service, we absolutely cannot let the principles of humanity stay at home. has to be present in that surrounding. I've never met a chaplain who supports the idea of war. We are non-combatants. We don't participate in it, except that we choose to place ourselves where harm might be, because our loved ones and the loved ones of everybody else there are present. And so it's important to keep the principles of spiritual development and emotional growth and principles of just human decency alive for those who are having to be in harm's way.
I want to come back to this picture because, as we were talking about it this week, this wasn't like something that happened on a very, very rare occasions.
No.
This is how you got from point A to point B pretty often. So a little different than maybe a lot of our commutes, you might say. And I was thinking about how this idea of chaplaincy is something that we can all apply to our own context, that maybe we aren't all being airlifted from point A to point B. Maybe we aren't all walking with people literally in engine rooms or on flight decks. But we all have our own context in which we can meet people where they are, in which we can, like you said, stand in a form of harm's way, to walk with people, to share in common humanity. This idea that really at its core to be a chaplain is to share your cloak. We can all share our cloak with someone. And we've been exploring in this series what that looks like, what it means to walk with people, to hold people in difficult circumstances without fixing, without trying to resolve anything necessarily. So I wonder if you would perhaps share some stories from your experiences that highlight this idea of being with someone without necessarily resolving their issues, but standing with them, walking alongside them, meeting them where they are.
Yeah, I've discovered as I get older that I know less and less, intellectually perhaps. My belief is stronger than it's ever been, but I sense that sometimes I don't have the answers that I thought I did at one point in life. Maybe that's just growing up and growing older. But yeah, the presence idea is expressed, for instance, in the times at the Naval Academy when I would experience the importance of just standing by somebody. I turned a corner one morning walking to my office in the chapel. We lived in an apartment complex in the yard, they call it. And walking there, I saw a young midshipman leaning against the chapel wall with his head against it. And I thought, this is not normal. You don't see this every day. What's going on? It turns out that he was really suffering from some disappointments, unusual disappointment, because when we talked, he said, "Chaplain, I'm so sad, and I don't think I can continue my time here." And I said, "Why? What's going on?" "I made a B in a class instead of all A's." And I thought, you got a problem, kid. We used to have parties when I made C's. Get over it. Something as simple as that to the time that another presence idea. We would meet with all of the midshipmen on a big workout training field to be with them and actually do the same physical training that they were doing. Quite a few years difference between the first-year student there and the old man who's trying to do sit-ups and push-ups. But it was a signal to them. It was a presence issue again. There were times when we gathered families together pre-deployment, when ships were going to leave and be gone for 7 or 8 months at a time. To be with the families was important. So we'd gather the families together and do a pre-deployment briefing and time together. A post-deployment also when the ship was coming back, just to be together and give support. So there were a lot of times, Jake, when standing with somebody was a simple thing to do. Sometimes it was a hard thing to do. Death happens. Particularly in a setting like that where the not opportunity, but the reality of death is all around you. The last thing you want to see if you're living in government quarters or even in your own civilian home, and you have a loved one on active duty and maybe in a dangerous kind of setting, the last thing you want to see is a chaplain walking up the sidewalk with a dress uniform on. That's not always good news. And at MCAS Yuma, where I was stationed with the Marine Corps, the call came that a plane had gone down, and it was my responsibility to go to the young wife and her children and explain what had happened, inform her. There were times, Jake, when I would drive through the neighborhood, even as a chaplain, driving in my car, and people would see me drive through and say, "Oh no, what's happened?" In that setting, it's so important to be with somebody and to tend to the emotional and the physical, spiritual needs of a person at that time. So those kinds of episodes occurred, and the involvement of simply walking along with somebody without the answers necessarily, but just the support of spiritual concern.
As I was reflecting on knowing what we were going to be talking about and the heaviness of it, I was drawn to this quote from Henry Nouwen, who said, "When we dare to stand with someone in their pain without trying to take it away, we discover that love is stronger than suffering."
Exactly.
In many ways, it's very true to what we've been talking about in this series and what you're talking about today, that, sometimes you have to bear some really difficult news. You can't shield someone from the pain that's inevitable, but by being there, by standing with them, and in a way you can prove the presence of love, and whatever that's worth in that moment.
1989, the USS Iowa was underway and doing a training exercise with ordnance. It was a battleship, big gunship, beautiful ship. But there was an explosion in the forward turret and killed 47 sailors because the impact of that explosion went from the turret all the way down several decks to where the ammunition was stored. I was asked to become a casualty assistance officer as a chaplain. So I met a family. About 2 weeks later, all the families came to the port city for a memorial service, and it was my responsibility to walk with this family for 2 weeks that they were there, every day to be with them, to be a support, to be a resource. Another example of the kind of presence in a suffering moment where love is stronger than the suffering and finally wins out. I was a hospice chaplain for about 5 years, and I remember going into a room in a medical setting where a patient had been essentially comatose for about a week. Her daughter was sitting next to the bed, and I walked in and we had a conversation, and we're in the midst of it when I looked over and I saw this woman who had not moved in a week. I saw her sit up and raise her hands and put them back down and lay her head back on the pillow and die. The presence in that moment was so impactful, so beautiful, that it just reminds us again and again that being with someone at the moment of death, of suffering, is so critically important. And we can all do that. It's not just a person in a uniform or wearing a badge of some kind. We can all do that.
And many of us, if not all of us, may be called upon to stand in that way for someone.
Exactly.
We all have lost, people. Many of us have been present during those losses. We all have friendships and people and relationships in which others are going through loss. And so I think we all have the opportunity to draw from that same place. It can be feel really risky and scary to step into a situation that feels so difficult and so unimaginable. But I'm reminded by you just the power of presence and the fact that takes pressure off to be anything other than just showing up with love.
Yes.
I was reminded this week of this quote by an MD who has a focus on spirituality and palliative care. Christina Puchalski says, To accompany someone in their dying is not to remove their fear, but to refuse abandonment. This could be in death, this could be in great difficulty, but to walk each other home, right? And really, in many ways, that Ram Dass quote, a lot of people have used that to talk about home as in returning home, as in death, as in that great transition. But to walk with someone in that, to walk with someone in even just the difficulties of life, is really not to be able to remove all of their fear, but it's to say, no, I'm not gonna leave you alone in it. And sometimes that is all that makes all the difference.
One of my favorite quotes concerning fear of death was by that eminent philosopher Woody Allen, who once said, "I'm not afraid of dying. I just don't want to be there when it happens." We all have this fear of being alone, of being abandoned, of an unknown. And just to have love with you, just to feel the presence of love overcomes some of that fear, I think.
As we talk about really going into the depths of human experience, which you have had the opportunity to do time and time again throughout your life and your career, and now I see you in a state of continually growing and evolving, and even sitting up here and saying, I'm more open to what I don't know than ever before, which is part of this ever expanding evolution. And that's a beautiful thing. It's not necessarily true that every human being chooses to continue to stay open, but I know that there's a room full of people here who exemplify that and hold that for each other, which is so beautiful. But for you specifically, looking back at this journey, what about this journey has been an invitation to stay open, to continue to spiritually grow? You were trained in a tradition, you had these positions, these high status positions, and yet you've come to this place of just saying, I continue to want to experience the newness of life. And so what's that look like for you?
It looks like Aldea. It looks like all these people. And you. Yeah, life is a journey. Life is and it's not about a destination. It's not about certainty. It's not about answers. It's about asking questions, and it's about moving, and it's about being open to change. And to find this particular spiritual gathering here at Aldea has been the village of love, the village of hope, and openness. We all change over time, and I look back at myself and see myself 50 years ago. I've been ordained almost 60 years, and I look back at those early days and think, I had all the answers. I had a little toolbox with all the answers, and just ask me and I could give you the answer. I know so little, but I feel so much. And I think that's the essence of just walking a journey, being blessed by individuals and collectively by groups like this, and feeling that emotional and spiritual affirmation that says it's okay, life is good. It may stink sometimes, it may be hard sometimes, but it's basically good. And I'm looking forward to the next step, whatever that is. I try to be open to things like that.
Well, as we talked, I know that you have you're quite a writer. You have, as obviously we got to already enjoy some of that. And I know that there's something that you'd like to share.
I brought a little piece to share, and I'll be right back.
Okay, there you go. Oh, I thought he was going to leave. I was like, I'm ready to do 5 if I need.
I'm back. I wrote this, and I tried to think of a title for it, and it pertains to what we're talking about, doing something good with your life, as we all try to do. And I tried to find a title for this, and I thought, and finally 2 words came to me. Love, period. And I've heard that somewhere before. I'm not quite sure where, but that's what I call this, love, period. I'm trying to decide what I did today that serve the common good. Stop a war, feed the poor. Don't you think I should be able to identify something to call good? But I suppose if truth be known, I thought more of my needs, my own, and hurried through this busy day, missing the moments when I could say, you are of value, or that's a nice dress, or I'm sorry I got you into this mess. Now darkness settles. Moonlight flows through the slatted blinds before they close, and the soft light of heaven falls on you. And it was then that I remembered what I always knew. If I do nothing on a particular day, if I choose to live with nothing to say, if the day seems wasted for the lack of a deed, I think of the world's undeniable need to love each other without asking reward, to face together those times that are hard, to be just and kind, faithful, true. Even if there's little we thoughtfully do, creation is blessed because I have loved you, and you in turn have loved me too. For love released, given away, is more profound than what I do or what I say. Today we loved, and the earth rejoiced, for we made the unreasonable, impractical choice of putting aside all the musts and the shoulds and doing the one thing that is truly good. We loved with abandon. We loved without fear. You took my arm, and I held you near as we walked together through this remarkable day, following our hearts along the better way. Did you and I do anything good today? And the answer is yes. We gave love away. And when we did, it came back to embrace and to shine in the joy of each beautiful face. Did I do anything important today? I did. I loved along the way. And may I find the will as tomorrow begins to do the same thing all over again. It's a privilege. It's a joy.
Can we just take a moment, if you're comfortable, if you'd be willing to close your eyes or just create a soft gaze. And I just want to take a second for us to allow this all to sink in. You know, we spoke about so much. We went into the depths together today. And I want us to remember that this conversation, this moment, this hour that we shared together, it will never happen again, not in this way. This time that we've spent, this moment is unique in all of the moments that have ever existed. And we shared it together. And so we just reflect on the special, the fragility, the preciousness of each moment. And as we reflect on this conversation, the music, the meditation for today, that we search our own heart for anything that really has stood out to us as something we'd like to carry into our lives, into tomorrow. And whether it's an insight, whether it's a quote, or whether it's something beyond words, simply a feeling and an essence, we just allow that to rise above in our hearts, to crystallize, to imprint onto our heart today. And we can see ourselves carrying this insight and this truth into our lives in the days to come. We have gratitude for one another, for holding this space, for walking alongside each other today just by being here. And when you're comfortable, you can open your eyes. And I just want to extend my deepest gratitude. And I know, on behalf of everyone else, we're all very grateful for your sharing today, Roger. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.